everyone, hope you guys are doing great. I'm Shruti, your host for the event, and I cordially welcome you all to the second day of the most awaited DarkCON 2021, organized by Dark Army. Dark Army is an open source team of security enthusiasts eager to learn and grow. And DarkCON 2021 has been an effort from our side to make a small contribution to the community. At first, I would like to thank all of you for being a part of this experience right from the beginning till now. It really means a lot from our side. Just like yesterday, we have our today's speakers, DarkStar, Tiberius and Aneesh Dogra, and lots of interesting giveaways and prizes on the way as well. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our honorable speakers, our team, Dark Army, and of course, not to mention our precious audience. Glad to say you all make it possible, and it really wouldn't be possible without your immense support and cooperation. Special thanks to our sponsors, Offensive Security, DigitalOcean, TryHackMe, BugCrowd, BurpBounty, Spyse, Intigriti, Pentester Academy, and XSSRat. Also, a small reminder, Dark Army is organizing a 24-hour CTF from tomorrow 4 p.m. IST, so if you still haven't registered yet, go and do it, and don't forget to join our Discord for remaining updated about further activities and events. So let's not waste more time and get started. Hope you guys will enjoy it a lot. We have our first speaker for the day, DarkStar. He is a penetration tester and a content director and community manager at TryHackMe. Welcome, sir. We applaud your presence and thank you wholeheartedly for being a part of this conference. He will also be doing a giveaway. We will be picking up questions based on his talk and supply it to you all through a Google form. And the first person to submit all correct answers gets 2 TryHackMe vouchers. So make sure you make the most out of his talk, and for now, stay focused, stay tuned with us, and enjoy.
Hey everyone, welcome to my talk here at DarkCON. I am Dark. I go by DarkStar7471 on Twitter. And today I'm going to be talking about SIEM. So specifically, we're going to talk about finding your foes with an introduction to SIEM. First, let's go ahead and go through the overview. Again, overview, woohoo, it's this slide. I hope you could tell that. We're going to talk about what's a SIEM, what different flavors we can have in that. Why do I care about SIEMs? What can we actually look at with SIEMs? Different limitations that we see, which is something that not a lot of people necessarily talk about. We'll talk about a demo I'm going to go ahead and run through using Alien Vault's or AT&T Alien Vault's online demo here in just a little bit. That's something that you can play around with at home. We're going to do some further exercises, or I'll show you where you can do some further exercises to play with this, and then we'll get into our conclusion. Quick little about me. I am a penetration tester at State Farm. Additionally, I am the content director and community manager over at TryHackMe.com. I handle the release queue. I handle what content comes out. And I also manage the community and all of sponsorship and things like that. So what's a SIEM? SIEM stands for Security, Information, and Event Management. Think of it as a giant bucket. And when I say a bucket, traditionally you're putting water or something liquid in a bucket. In this case, we're putting our logs in the bucket so that we can consolidate them and start looking through them. This is done for the primary purpose of being able to detect threat actors on our network and being able to see when things go wrong. One of the more interesting things that you can get out of this, and that's more useful on a day-to-day basis, is you can often see when there are misconfigurations within your domain or within a company from your SIEM, because you'll start seeing alerts, and you can, if you are experienced or you have the alerts set up correctly, you will be able to see where something's wrong. So again, we talked about it being a bucket. This is primarily for information collection. So you're looking at a couple different sources. Primarily, it's going to be host intrusion detection, your HIDS system. In this case, I'll be talking about OSEC. You don't necessarily need to know what that is if you don't have any experience with SIEMs. I'll talk about that in just a little bit. host intrusion detection, the HIDS part is an agent that's installed on each one of the computers that you want to monitor. A lot of times this is going to be, you can put it on your endpoints. Some people do that. I recommend doing that. Endpoints, I mean computers that your employees are using. Then you can also have them on web servers and things like that. And that's where they're very, very important. Anything that's externally facing is something that you absolutely want these on. Getting it from your host or individual host can be a lot of data, but it is worth it if you can get it. The second bit of this is the actual net flow. Now, net flow has to do with, as you might have guessed, your actual data flow in and out of the network. This is typically done at via a mirror port. Depending on the size of your organization, this can be a lot of data. For smaller organizations, this can be easier. For larger ones, it's worthwhile doing this just because NetFlow provides a ton of value. But again, it's a lot of data and you need to be able to handle it. It's a traffic duplicator. So think of, you take a port on your switch or your router and you just mirror it. So everything that goes in that port also goes, or goes out of that port rather, also goes out of another port. And that port goes straight to your SIEM so that you can start analyzing that. Let's talk about some flavors. So first we have Alien Vault OSIM or USM. This is something that I am professionally trained on from a previous position that I had. This is the one that I have the most experience with. This is one that I find works really well for small to medium-sized clients. Depending on the implication, I know that they are moving to a cloud-based system, which I understand is better for larger clients. But it's a nice SIM that specifically OSIM, that's something that you can play around with at home. Additionally, there is the IBM Q Radar. That is something that you can use. I know that it's just IBM's solution for this. I've seen that it is really popular and it's really, really nice. Next, we have Splunk, which isn't necessarily specifically a SIM solution. Splunk can be used for a lot of things. It's used for number crunching. It is an analytics engine more than anything. However, one of its most popular purposes is for doing data collection for using it as a SIM. Yeah, so Splunk is something that it has a lot of uses. Unfortunately, it can have a very high skill gap or a takes a lot of training on to get used to it, just because there's a lot you can do with it. It's a prime example of a tool that gives you a lot up front, that you have a lot of options and a lot of flexibility, but because of that, it can be very daunting at first, especially for new users. I've alluded to this a little bit. These vary in purpose and target business environment. Those are the primary things that you want to consider when you are looking at a different one. Again, if you're just playing with one of these at home, there's also Graylog, which I believe classifies as a SIM. I'm not sure, but OSIM is something that I've played with at home, and I find that it works pretty well for a home lab environment. So you're going to consider your size, how much data that you're getting in, and then the type of business as well. Traditionally, if you are running a bigger business, you are probably going to have these layered up, just because Splunk you can do a lot of custom work with. It's very common to see Splunk on the back end that's doing a bunch of custom alerting, and you have layers of these SIMs that are catching different things because of different alarms that are plugged into them. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So why do you actually care? So let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So what we care about catching scans. One of the biggest things that I like to point out, and this is whenever I'm talking about, for example, the Mmap room on TryHackMe, is that a lot of people like to claim that Mmap scans or just basic network scans are stealthy, especially if you're using the -s or lowercase s, capital S option on Nmap. Well, I hate to break it to you. I hate to burst your bubble here. If you have a SIM that's set up that has net flow and can capture the network traffic, they're not stealthy at all. It's actually pretty obvious. Those are all run in different patterns, and those patterns are well known. Those tools are open source. It's very easy to see what's going on there, and they've existed for a long time at this point, especially in the world of cybersecurity. So we can catch that, which is awesome. We want to see when scans are going on, because that gives us a pretty good idea of either we know that someone is within our environment and scanning, and we want to know about that, or we see that scanning that's going on that's unauthorized. And I mean, that's not good. That's a big issue because it means that we probably have an incident that we need to be looking into, or we need to resolve if there's potentially an unknown pen test that's going on and we're being tested as blue team operators. The next thing that we'd be looking at catching is the active exploitation attempts. A lot of times with the HIDS agents, they will have signatures built in for catching things like sending different packet patterns and so on and so forth. Specifically, so let's talk about, for example, on Windows. If you are trying to use a Privesc method, such as one of the potato methods, those have a pretty distinctive signature, and that'll pop up on one of these, more than likely. So we can see those active exploitation attempts because they have known patterns. That's also the main reason why it pays to not use off-the-shelf tools if you are a red teamer and actively want to be able to bypass antivirus or AV, rather. Those have known signatures, and compiling your own, you're usually going to get past that. Network anomalies. So I mentioned this a little bit before. We can find issues in our network, which really falls under that bad qualities. Things that we can see things that are wrong. One of the prime examples here are DNS issues, because you can start seeing DNS lookup failures. A lot of times those will come up in the alarms. That can also come up as active scanning as well, because you can see someone scanning for different vhosts. You can do that with GoBuster and start looking for things, different host names that things would go by. We can also see service account lockouts. This is something that happens a lot in a business environment just because service accounts break, and this is something that you should be changing the account password to at least every year or so, ideally. But we can see account lockout failures. It's one of the most common alerts that you are going to see. Other than scans, just because anything that's out on the internet, if you are conducting NetFlow and HIDS data from it, you're going to see that it's getting scanned, because things that are out on the internet, well, they get scanned. One tangent here: if you've ever heard someone give you the advice that you shouldn't just leave, like, a Pi hole or another Raspberry Pi project or something else, or whatever your game server is, facing out on the public internet from your private home network, this is why, because it's going to get scanned, and if it has any issues with it and you are, not keeping it up to date, some threat actor is probably going to write an automated bot that will go through and compromise it. So with the SIEM, if you are collecting data off of that, you can see that, and that's what can result sometimes in those service account lockouts. Additionally, we can see data transfers and exfiltration. That's one of the more interesting things out of this, that from NetFlow, you can start seeing these big data transfers happen. While it's not always possible to see everything with this, especially some of the more stealthy data transfer methods, such as with DNS requests and things like that, we can start to see, even just looking at heuristical data and looking at how much data is moving in and out of our environment, we can start to see where things look a little weird. For example, if you see one host sending, 100,000 DNS lookup requests, that host is probably bad. And again, you can see that exfiltration. One of the things that a lot of SIEMs will have built in is system monitoring. So looking at uptime and service availability, you can have that where if a HIDS agent is not responding, it will start setting off alarms after a little bit. Very nice if you want to do just some basic monitoring. That can be done with a number of different tools, but a lot of these just have it built in. Additionally, one of the best parts of a SIEM, depending on who you ask, is they're great at making you look busy, especially when you have a lot of alarms sitting in front of you. It is a great way to have your boss walk by, and he looks at what you're doing and sees that you're busy, and he just smiles, knowing that you're a busy little beaver at your desk and you're doing a great job, even though it's just a bunch of alarms coming in. Keep in mind, when I say a bunch of alarms coming in, that's something that can happen just because, there are normal things that happen on a domain. For example, that service account lockouts. And as I mentioned, with things sitting on the internet, things get scanned. That's not necessarily an issue. I mean, you want to block IPs that are scanning you constantly, that you don't want them scanning you. But you can see things that just pop up, and there's not necessarily a lot you can do about some of these things. What can we actually look at? And I apologize for the poor graphic. That is one that doesn't show up very well in video. That is the Open Threat Exchange, OTX by Alien Vault. That is a service that I'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. It allows us to exchange threat signatures between researchers. So what can we look at? Host logs. We can look at the Windows event log. Super duper interesting. Event viewer. If you've ever played around with it, you've probably noticed that there is a ton of information that Windows gives you, and you can get that off of there. There are different services that you can make that a little bit more queryable and easier to work with. However, at first glance with the SIEM, we can pull it off and start getting some useful things right away. Additionally, we can see Linux syslog, very, very useful. We can also see service logs, which is going to be really helpful to us, especially if we have a very prominent web server, for example, that's sitting on the internet. I mean, we want to see if someone potentially accesses an administrator page, and we can see that in the web server requests, where suddenly we have a GET request for something that, someone shouldn't be able to get. Very, very useful to us, and you can set up different alerts from that. Additionally, from NetFlow, we can see active connections. From this, if you get lucky, you can see C2 communications. That's something that, in my experience, is typically, you will observe that either with known signatures or with just very, known signatures in the form of immature threat actors. And when I say immature, I mean people that are not really going out of the box. They're just using either ransomware or just some sort of malware that is just being drop shipped and sold either on the black market or something like that. And they don't change the C2 communication signature of it. A lot of the times, those are very quickly documented by security researchers, such as ourselves, and those become signatures in your SIEM. Additionally, attempted exploits, I referenced this a little bit earlier. You can see those come in externally. It's very common to see different attacks against devices depending on the signatures that they are displaying online. And when I say signature, I mean, think of maybe your router is exposed on the public internet. Ideally, it's not, but if it's exposed on the public internet, someone can be scanning that. And if it's potentially a vulnerable version, it's probably going to have attempted exploits run against it by bots. Additionally, we can get IP reputation, and this is where that Open Threat Exchange OTX comes into play. With this, we can share our threat signatures between security researchers, and we can start getting different reputations built up for IPs. And we can label IP addresses in entire areas and IP blocks as bad, and they're just known to be used by threat actors. That's actually really common to see that pop up for AWS or DigitalOcean or other rented services, just because you can see where a lot of those with dynamically generated servers, that threat actors would find that pretty, convenient because that's not their infrastructure. Here's a good diagram that I had found that kind of shows how a SIEM works. So you see over on the left that we have the firewall, the server, IPS, router, switches, workstation, all of the logs, all of the data from that, and we can funnel it into the bucket that is the SIEM, and we can put it all together. With this, you can start building out your kill chains, and even if you do have an instance of compromise that you need to start forming incident response to, you can see how things fit together. You can look at the logs, you can look at the timestamps and see when things happened, and you can usually start to get a picture of what went wrong, when it went wrong, and who done it. Some limitations. So again, this is something that not everyone talks about. SIEMs do have limitations. They're not a panacea. They're not a cure-all, as much as we would love that in the security community. So the first one is HTTPS. So we can see where DNS requests are going to, unless secure DNS is being used. But HTTPS, we can't see the actual data in there, which is good because that's to be expected. With this, this becomes a little bit trickier for school environments where you need SSL stripping and things like that, specifically because a lot of schools, especially in the United States, are required to monitor that content that goes outbound because, well, they want to make sure that you're not looking up something that's inappropriate for a school environment, either just is somehow inappropriate there. So you can see where SSL stripping, it can be done with this, but generally speaking, SIEMs don't do that. There are other products that will do that for you, but again, it's a little bit of a mixed bag there. Additionally, data limitations. What you give is what you get. If you aren't giving data to your SIEM, it's not going to give you any useful information back. If you have HIDS data, from one host on your network out of 3,000, you are going to get next to nothing. I hope you really care about that host because you went through a lot of time and effort to get data off of one host for setting up your SIEM. Very, very bad idea. But you need to ideally put as much into it as possible. You need to make sure that you have long-term data storage solutions for this. If you can store this data, it's going to make auditing very easy. This is something that we find is I've found rather in my past experiences that having this data stored can give you access logs, and it can make giving data to auditors pretty easy, especially in PCI environments. Depth and finding the needle in the haystack. So this is something that especially is relevant with Splunk. If you have a bunch of data, you may not necessarily know what you were looking at, especially as a new SOC operator, the Security Operations Center rather. You may not know what you're looking at, and this is where experience is key. The more time you spend looking at your SIEM solution, and the more time you have with eyes on glass, you will start getting used to what is normal, what shouldn't be there, what attack patterns you've seen, and you'll start seeing things that jump out at you that shouldn't be there. So again, limitation there is that you do need to have that experience, and it's something that's gained over time. Suggested requirements. This is something that is just general requirements if you want to set up a SIEM at home. This is something that I just put together in case you want to play with OSIM, and I'll have that linked in the slides. ESXi vSphere works very well for this. That is VMware's server version of VMware Workstation. There is a free version of it available, and it works very well for all this. You can also put other virtual machines on this. However, I don't recommend it. A SIEM is a very, very big appliance. It's probably not something you're going to want to leave up on your home network for incredibly long, but it's a great way to play with it. Ideally, you want about 8 CPU cores. This is very intensive. It's very CPU intensive. It's very RAM intensive for doing queries, so 16 gigs of RAM is great, and then 1 to 2 terabytes of storage, if not even more. Again, you're going to want more for a home, or less for a home network, more for a business network. And then you need several NICs. That's because your mirror port, and whenever you're collecting data, it needs a dedicated port that is coming in on. So these are general business recommendations. Your mileage may vary. And again, it's just kind of a what works for your environment. This is something that I recommend going with for a baseline for something like OSIM, but you can adjust it as necessary. All right, we're going to go ahead and jump into a demo. When we're back, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the Alien Vault OSIM or SIEM solution online, and we'll walk through that just a little bit. I'm going to show you what an alert looks like and show you what looking at digging into that a little bit can get you. And we're back. Okay, so I've gone ahead and pulled up the Alien Vault demo, and you can probably see right away that this is a lot of data that we are seeing. This is something I do have linked in the slide notes as well, and again, I'll put the slides out with the talk itself. So digging into this, we can see first off on our dashboard here, we can see our total number of alarms today, along with this week, along with our deltas compared to either last week or yesterday. Very helpful, especially if you are seeing a lot of pretty consistent data throughout the work week. And this is something that you expect to be relatively consistent, so you can start seeing if things are wrong here. Over here on the right, we can see alarms by intent. This is something that a lot of SIEM solutions have, or something similar to this. You can see that we have different bubbles that are either bigger or smaller, depending on how many alarms we've gotten in that time frame that you can see down here. In which category that they actually fall into. So everything that we get is actually categorized with the MITRE numbering system, so we can actually see where things fall into an attack or kill chain rather, and we can start seeing the entire picture. So putting together the actual attack using the little bits of data that we know and just going from there. Over here on the left, we can see different event data sources, so we can see where our data is actually coming from. This is helpful to see if one of these all of a sudden goes down. You'll usually get an alert for low log volume or things like that, but again, useful. We can see what's kicking things out. We can see that we have different patterns here for the actual events. This is fairly typical to have a pattern form here just because of the 5-day work week, so just something to be aware of, but you can see how we get a little bit of an overview there. We can see our sensor activity, so wherever we have sensors in the network, this is kind of an Alien Vault thing, so I won't go into that too much. We can see different discovery things for our actual network. This has a vulnerability scanner built in. I don't believe if they have that anymore, but they at least do asset discovery. There are different little features that you can find depending, and here you go, you can see the vulnerability scanner. Different little features that you can find per each SIEM that you're working with. Let's go ahead and look at the different alarms. So you can see that I had quite a number of options. Again, there's a lot here. You can see different alarms that we can actually play with, along with the actual events feed itself. So we have alarms that are generated by events. The events are the actual things that are coming in from our devices. The alarms are typically what we care about, though. And let's take a look at this first alarm here, this high. So we have the CNC, so C2 communication, malware beaconing to C2. We can see its priority here, so the severity right there, the alarm status, this is something you can close if you have already addressed it. This is very helpful if you have multiple operators looking at the same SIEM setup, which is fairly typical. Usually you're going to have multiple people looking at these alarms. We can see the actual source that this is coming from, and then the destination if it's outbound of our network or within our network as well. We can drill down in here so we can actually take a look at the other events or other alarms that are associated with the sources and destinations. Very helpful, especially if you want to see if there are things that predate this C2 beacon. And typically you're going to see a lot more where there's smoke, there's fire kind of thing. So you're going to start being able to drill down and actually find more useful information there. Let's go ahead and click into this, and we can see that we have a little pop-up on the side. So here we have the total summary of the C2 beacon that we're actually observing. We can see the status again. We can see the malware family, very useful. That we can see that this is going to link to OTX, so Open Threat Exchange, that it's going to start talking about pulses from that. So those are the actual indicators that we can share with the community. We can see the HTTP hostname that's involved, the rule attack ID. Again, this is referencing the MITRE framework. The tactics, so command and control there. The sensor that it's actually coming from, along with some additional data. In this case, we can see the events that actually generated this alarm. So again, alarms are generated as a result of these events happening. And we can see them down in here. Typically, it'll be more than one. However, this is a case of a pretty severe event, so we can see that why this actually popped up in this case. We have a brief description, and then we have the strategy. So it looks like communication from your system to a malware C2 server has been identified. This is an indicator that your system has malware installed. Super bad, something we would look into if this were in a demo environment. And then the intent, system compromised alarms identify behavior associated with compromised systems or user accounts. We can see just general information about what we're looking at. Additionally, Alien Vault will attempt to supply a recommendation down here of what we should do. And these are pretty general steps, and they're usually pretty spot on, at least for the general process that you want to follow. There are a couple more things that we can do here, like creating rules, how we want to, if we want to notify on this, or so for example, if we want to send an email whenever we see something like this, this can be helpful if you're trying to root something out. We can create a suppression rule if we know that this is a false positive and we know that this is not anything useful to us, and then we can also do actions from this. So get forensics information. This can run an action on the actual afflicted host. So for example, we can capture the actual memory, see what's going on there. We can scan it. And in this case, it's an authenticated scan, so it'll actually log in and scan that machine. And then we can also query information with it. So very useful. You can see that how there's a lot of information that's presented to us here that we can use to start drilling down into the actual issues that are present within our network. Yeah, definitely something that I recommend playing with. This is one of the cases where just playing around with this, setting it up, messing up the setup process a couple times, and just making sure that you can start getting data in, and even having this just set up on your home lab if you're doing different attacks, like installing different vulnerable virtual machines, you can get a lot of educational value out of this. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to pause this. We'll be back to the slides in just a second. All right, and we're back. There you can see the link to that demo. You can just enter in bogus information there if you want to, and if you want to play around with that. OSIM is the free version of this for home usage. Again, it's a very big install. I definitely do recommend playing with it, though. If you are interested in this and want to learn more, here's a couple exercises that you can do. So first and foremost, there is a Splunk exercise room on TryHackMe that's a little bit dated at this point. I would actually recommend taking a look at the entire blue path now, and then the OSIM installation that I referenced a couple times that is absolutely worthwhile going and tooling around with. So in conclusion, having a SIEM will give you enhanced visibility into your actual network. It's going to improve your understanding of that network as well, provide you a means to establish defenses, and it'll make you 100% cooler. And that is going to do it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. It is going to be at DarkStar7471, or you can email me, or so on and so forth. I'm on the Discord, but otherwise, you guys have a great time with the rest of this conference.
That was an amazing talk by DarkStar. And now finally, we have the giveaway. We will be supplying you with a Google form that picks up questions from his talk. And the first person to submit correct answers will get 2 TryHackMe vouchers. So make sure you put the best out of whatever you have learned from his talk. And I wish you best of luck for the same. Introducing our next speaker for the day, Tiberius. He is a web app hacker and the developer of an automated service enumeration tool, AutoRecon. He will be doing a giveaway as well. There will be questions based on his talk, and the first person to submit correct answers gets 1 Udemy course voucher. So check if this could be your chance to win a course coupon, and stay tuned with us.
Hello, I am Tiberius, and firstly thank you very much to DarkCON for inviting me to speak. As some of you might be aware, I know a thing or two about privilege escalation, so for this talk I'll be covering a few weird privilege escalation techniques. I guess the first thing I should do is define weird. Google gave me this definition, like very strange or unusual and difficult to explain, which I think is pretty good. I'll be focusing on 4 privilege escalation methods, 2 from Linux, 2 from Windows, all of which I would say are strange or unusual, but hopefully not too difficult to explain. I'm a great believer in learning by doing, and also that practice makes perfect. So everything I'm going to show you today, you can go try for yourself by signing up for a free account on TryHackMe. You do not need a paid subscription at all. The 2 room URLs shown on the screen are available to everyone, and they also have a load more privilege escalation techniques that you can try out too. So let's start off by talking about bash globbing. On Linux systems, if you run the command ls, you get a list of the files in the current directory. That's pretty simple. But if you run ls with an asterisk, you get the same result. What's happening here? Does the ls command ignore the asterisk, or does it parse it somehow? Well, interestingly, if we run the echo command with an asterisk, we get the same result again. This is a big clue to what is going on, because echo is just used to, well, echo whatever you tell it back. So this is actually bash causing this. When you type an asterisk in a bash prompt, bash is going to take that asterisk and effectively replace it with a space-separated list of the names of the non-hidden files in the current directory. And after it's done that, it just runs whatever command you typed. So in the previous example, what we typed was ls followed by an asterisk. but the command that actually got executed was ls followed by a list of the files in the directory. And when you give ls a list of file names as arguments, it's just going to return them. This is known as bash globbing, also file name expansion, and it doesn't stop at a single asterisk. You can create some rather complex regex looking patterns like this one. This one will match only 1.txt and 2.txt and leave off 3.txt. And you can probably see why. If you've ever played around with regex, it's kind of obvious. So you're probably wondering, how does this relate to privilege escalation? But to fully answer that, you have to understand two more things. The first thing is that commands really don't know the context of any arguments that bash passes to them, i.e. whether they are typed explicitly by the user or generated from file name expansion. The second thing you need to know is that Linux file systems have hardly any restrictions on file names. For example, --foo and --foo equals bar are both valid file names. So this leads to the question, what happens if we create a file called --help and run ls asterisk? Let's try it. So I am logged on to a Debian system as a low privileged user account. Let's create --help. We can do this pretty easily using the touch command /--help. If I just type ls, there it is. So if I type ls asterisk, what happens is we get the ls help text, right? And that's because when we typed ls asterisk, bash interpreted the asterisk as this list of files, which means that when we ran ls, --help was the first thing after it, which obviously creates this help text. Okay, so let's remove --help so it doesn't screw up anything else. How can we use this to privilege escalate? Well, if we look at the system-wide cron tab, we see that the root user is running this script every minute. And if we see what this script does, it CDs into our user's home directory, and it runs the tar command to back up all the files, and it passes the asterisk as a wildcard. So if we go to GTFO bins, which is a great site that has a list of all the ways you can really bypass security restrictions on Linux binaries, or Unix binaries really. If we search tar and click here, we can see that tar has these things called checkpoints, and you can run your own code here. So what this does, that if a checkpoint's set to 1, it means that the checkpoint action will be executed every one file, right, that tar processes. So we can use this to create a script and tell tar to execute it every time a file is processed. So we're back in our home directory. I'm going to create the file privesc.sh. We're going to make it a bash script. And what we're going to do, because this is running as root, we're going to copy bin bash to the temp directory as root bash. And then we're going to use the chmod command to give temp root bash SUID. It's going to set the SUID bit, which means when it executes, it's going to execute as root because it's a root-owned file. So if we save that and make that script executable, now what we need to do is create a file --checkpoint equals 1 and a file --checkpoint -action equals exec equals, and then the name of our script. So let's do that. Firstly, we'll copy this. We can do it all in one command. So we'll paste that. And then we'll copy this bit all the way up to the equals. And then we'll do /. And then we'll type privesc.sh because that's the command we want to execute. And if we now type ls, we see we have those two commands and the Privesc script. And let's check what time we are. It looks like we timed it pretty well, so we've got 3 seconds to wait. If I do an ls/temp now, we have root bash here. It was created, I think, just a few seconds ago. So now what we can do is we can run root bash. And remember, if you aren't familiar with doing an SUID version of bash, to get it to actually execute with root permissions and not downgrade you, you need to use -p. And so you can see if I type ID, we are actually, our effective UID is set to root, or I can just type who am I, and we are root. The second weird Linux Privesc I'll be covering is a writable/etc/password file. This file is usually world readable, and that's fine. It contains useful information relating to users on the system. However, the file has a dark history in Unix, and originally it stored the hashed password of each user as well. Obviously, having read access to password hashes is bad, so eventually the hashes were moved to /etc/shadow, which is only readable by root. Here's an example line from /etc/password showing information about the root user. The fields are all separated by colons, so the first is just the username, the third and fourth are the UID and the primary group ID, respectively. Then we have the general information field, the user's home directory, and which login shell they use. Now, I purposefully skipped over the second field, though. That is where the password hash used to be stored. On all modern Unix-based systems, including Linux, that field will just contain an X, which effectively means that the hash is stored in the shadow file. However, most systems still support password hashes being stored there, and since the password file gets checked before shadow, if you have write access to etc password, you can generate a password hash, update the field, and use that password to authenticate as that user. Things don't stop there though, because if you simply leave the field blank, some systems will take that to mean that the user has no password at all, and you can simply switch to that user without having to type anything else. Of course, overwriting the root user's password or making it blank is a huge no-no in a real engagement, so my recommended way of exploiting this is to take advantage of user aliases. We talk about users in terms of usernames, but on Linux, really the only thing that matters or should matter is the UID of the user. Remember, the UID is the third field in the user's entry, so root's UID is 0. However, to add to the weirdness, you can have multiple users with the same UID, provided the username is different. I call this an alias. I'm not actually sure if it's got an official name. Either way, if we have write access to etc password, we can just create ourselves a brand new user who, for all intents and purposes, is the root user, just with a different name. I tend to use new root. You'll note that the only thing I've changed is the username, and then you can do whatever you want with the second field. I recommend setting a password, especially if you're doing this in a real-world environment, but the same trick with no password can sometimes work as well. So let's check this out. We are back on Debian as our low-privileged user account. Let's check the permissions of the etc password file. And as you can see, it's still owned by root, but it is writable by everyone, which means we can just edit the file. We'll go to the very end and paste in our new root user account with the password hash of password. Everything else the same. This is basically a copy of the first line, just with the username changed and obviously the new password. And then we can save that. And then to switch the user, we use the switch user command, or SU, and type new root. It's going to prompt for the password, which we know is just password. Press enter, and as you can see, we aren't new root, we are root, right? If I type ID, it says we're root. If I type who am I, it says we are root. And so we just privilege escalated by creating a user alias of root. Moving on to Windows now, the first weird privilege escalation technique here deals with unquoted service paths. So services in Windows have a bin path or binary path, which contains the command that the service runs when it starts up. Here's a quick example. If we use the SC utility to display the config of a service, among other information, there's the binary path name field, which in this case shows the command completely unquoted. Here's the same command, but with proper quotes. When configuring the service, if the bin path is surrounded by quotes, Windows knows to interpret the entire path literally. Weird stuff can start happening if you don't use quotes though, and it's due to the way Windows interprets commands. Executables in Windows usually have the .exe file extension, but you can type just the file name without the extension and Windows will still run it. This is why whoami and ipconfig both work, right? Both are actually .exes located in C Windows System 32. However, executables can take arguments, generally separated by spaces, and executables themselves can be referenced using their absolute path as well. And paths can also have spaces in them. So hopefully some of you may be seeing the problem, right? Consider running the following unquoted command. C program files, some directory, some program.exe. To us, this looks like we're just running some program.exe, right? It's pretty obvious. But to Windows, this could be one of three potential commands. To more easily show how Windows tries interpreting this, I'm going to display what Windows thinks is the executable in green and what it thinks might be arguments in red. So firstly, it sees the space after program and thinks, okay, maybe program.exe is the executable, and there are two arguments, files \sum and directory \sum program.exe. Secondly, it sees the space after sum and thinks, okay, well maybe sum.exe is the executable, and there is only one argument, directory \sum program.exe. And finally, as a last resort, it will consider the full command as it was originally written. What makes this exploitable as a privilege escalation is Windows tries executing these in this order until it finds one that works. So if you have permission to create program.exe or sum.exe, you can create your own executable, which will run when the service starts. So I am connected to the Windows machine as the low privileged user account. And if we use SC to query the unquoted SVC service, we can see the binary path name is indeed unquoted and it has some spaces. So what we need to do now is determine whether our user can create program.exe in the C drive or unquoted.exe in the program files directory or common.exe in the unquoted path service directory. And what we're going to use to do that is icacls. This command will just basically, if we give it a file path, so C, it'll tell us which users or groups have access and what kind of access. So the users group, which we're a member of, doesn't really have write access here. If we try for program files, again, our users don't have write access. So let's try that unquoted path service directory. And this time, the built-in users group has full access to this directory. So that means we can create files. So if we scroll up, we have access to this directory. So we need to create common.exe. And I've already created, you can see it on the desktop here, reverse.exe, which should just connect back to my Kali box. I just did that to keep things easy. So what we'll do is we'll copy that. I should spell copy correctly. Copy that from my desktop to C program files unquoted path service common.exe. Okay, one file copied, perfect. Now what I want to do is I'm just going to switch back to Kali, and we're going to create a listener on port 53. That's what I'm connecting back to. And finally, we need to start the service, and we can just do this with net start unquoted svc. And if we start that, you see we did get a shell back. And who are we running as? We're running as system, which is exactly who we should have been running as. So if we scroll up, we see that the service start name was local systems. This is who the service runs as. So that's how we privilege escalated, by effectively abusing this unquoted binary path name. The final weird privilege escalation technique I'll be covering is really just abusing the Windows GUI. Sometimes you'll encounter an environment where a GUI app will be running with admin privileges for whatever reason, and of course, if we can spawn a shell from this app, it will inherit those admin privileges. That's expected. What I find weird about Windows in this respect is that it's really easy to run programs using the standard dialog boxes, save, open, etc. If you've ever tested older Citrix environments, you'll know what I mean. But let's try it out. Okay, I am logged back onto Windows as the low privileged user account. And you can see on my desktop, I have this admin paint shortcut. If I double click that, it opens up Paint. But if we go to the task manager, and we select Paint, right click, go to details, it highlights it down here. We can see it's actually running as the admin user. So I've configured this in such a way it starts as admin. So what we can do is if we go to the file menu and click open, you can also do this with save. Generally speaking, so this is used to open files, right? But if you just click up here and type, for instance, C Windows System 32 cmd.exe, and don't press open because that'll actually try and open it, but press enter instead while the cursor's there, it actually spawns a command prompt. And if we type who am I, you can see we are running as admin. So now we have admin privileges from a command prompt and can execute commands. So the same thing works with the save. So we can just go up here again, C Windows System 32 cmd.exe, press enter, and it'll spawn that. And there's a few ways to get this, but effectively you can do it via this dialog. So that's just a weird quirk of Windows, the fact you can launch things from open or save dialog boxes. Thanks so much for watching my talk. I have a few social media links on the screen. I'm pretty active on Twitter, occasionally stream on Twitch, and trying to create some more YouTube content as well. I also have my own Discord server, or you can just add me as a friend directly. I love speaking to people about this kind of stuff, so please do reach out if you have any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them.
That was overwhelming indeed. We place our sincere gratitude to you for your time and efforts, for being a part of this conference, and for sharing your knowledge with us. It was, in fact, a very good experience to think of, actually. Now, regarding our giveaway, we will be providing you questions based on his talk through Google Form, and the first person to submit correct answers will get the prize. Also, a small reminder, Dark Army is organizing a 24-hour CTF from tomorrow 4 p.m. IST, so if you still haven't registered yet, go and do it and join our Discord for further updates. We have the last speaker for the day, Aneesh Dogra. He is currently working as a security engineer and loves to play CTFs during his spare time. Manipulation of memory and getting remote code execution fascinates him a lot, and his research interests include anti-censorship, application security, vulnerability discovery, and exploitation. Welcome, sir. We applaud your presence and are eagerly waiting to learn a lot from you. Also, to make this learning a bit more interesting, Dark Army has prepared a giveaway of a BugCrowd t-shirt. There will be a challenge based on his talk, and the first person to solve and get the flag gets the prize. Now you see, what you learn from today is not only going to boost your skills, but also may help you to get one t-shirt too. So let's not procrastinate anymore and get started.
Hello everyone, this is Aneesh and today I'm presenting a talk on Red to CSU. This is like a new exploit technique that I just stumbled upon while trying to solve some CTF problems. I found this technique pretty nifty because it doesn't have a lot of limitations, to be honest. If there is a binary compiled with libc, then you can definitely use this technique in most of the cases. And so today's agenda is going to be discussing what Red to CSU is, but to get there, we'll have to discuss a bit of other techniques and why they are not enough to kind of beat today's exploit mitigations. So yeah, just get started. So what is a ROP chain? A ROP chain is kind of an exploit technique which is used to hack buffer overflow vulnerabilities. Obviously, there's the Frax article in 1995 suggested that we would write a shellcode to some variable in the stack and then like leak that address and then jump to that address, right, using buffer overflow. But that technique doesn't really works because of some of the exploit mitigations that I'm going to discuss. But so ROP was this was the kind of birth of ROP, where attackers were trying to hack these programs, but after NX and ASLR and code signing were like kind of introduced, they had no way to exploit buffer overflow vulnerabilities, and that's when they kind of discovered, or someone might have tried to exploit a ROP, exploit using ROP. So yeah, today's exploit mitigations look like this. So you already have the stack not executable in mostly like 99% of the programs, and ASLR is always enabled in most of the recent OSs. So NX just means that stack is not executable. ASLR makes your address space layout randomized. So whenever you look at a program, if you debugged a program ever, you would see like there are functions in that program. That's the in the text segment, that's like the local code that you've written. But if you use like some libc functions like scanf, printfs, or these, then you can see that they go through a calling. They have a specific way of calling those functions, and they use stuff like plt and got tables, and then jump to an address in libc. And the libc is kind of like common for all of the programs, and you have one libc in your system usually, but you can obviously use ld preload to change libcs and stuff like that. But yeah, so ASLR kind of makes it hard to guess the address, what address is your function or your libc loaded at. Stack protector makes it harder for you to overflow without kind of calling the stack protector function. So stack protector just pushes a secret value at the start of the function when the stack is kind of getting created. So it's at the base of the stack, and whenever you overwrite, it's at the base of the EBP, and whenever you overwrite, the return pointer is just after that. So you'll have to overwrite the protector cookie, and obviously at the end of the function they're going to check if the cookie is changed or fiddled with, and then they'll alert, or they'll crash the program. So that was one of the exploit mitigation that was done to make it even harder to get EIP overwrite after stack overflow. And so to bypass that technique, even Rob cannot really do anything about it. You'll have to leak the stack cookie anyway, and then just incorporate that into your exploit. Then comes Relro, which is relocation read only. So I talked about briefly what is PLT and GOT. So these are these two tables that are used to call libc functions. And if you just disassemble your program that you compile, you'll see, and we'll also go through it in the demo later. But just to give you an idea, so relro means that these GOT table and PLT table entries are read only, so you cannot write anything to it. So imagine a scenario where you have like any write what primitive. So you can write at a got entry of puts and change it to some other functions. So whenever a programmer would call puts in his code, some other function would be calling. So that's how you kind of hijack the program's execution flow sometimes. And then the fifth one is PIE. PIE is kind of like a game changer for most of these exploits, because it really is kind of hard to develop an exploit with PIE binary, because PIE randomizes the code segment also. So, and yeah, we'll see how it looks like in a sample program. So for our first demo, I have created a simple program. It uses two libc functions, puts and gets, and it just takes input into a buffer which is size of 80, and yeah, it has no ways to check this when the sizes gets overwritten. So gets just is notoriously known for this. It's a common buffer overflow problem, basic one. So we can check out how it looks like in a debugger. This is how main is defined. You can see that there are two calls to gets and puts, which are to this 400 address. So let's just try to see how the calling convention looks like for these libc functions. I'm just going to run the program, set up a breakpoint at the call. We can see that we're going to call puts, and RDI should be here. It has buff, so everything's accurate. RDI is the first argument, so yeah. And now we see that it's going to jump at this keyword pointer, which means it's going to jump at this address pointed by this address. Yeah, so you can see that, yeah, this is how it looks. So this is the puts address in libc, and we can see that it's accurate. So it's just gonna jump there and print our thing. We can also see the security restrictions on this binary by just typing checksec, and we see that NX is enabled and relro is enabled, but there's no canary, there's no PIE, or there's no fortify. So to start with, let's just execute the program here. First of all, we have to disable ASLR. So we disabled ASLR, and this is just works on one shell. So make sure that you disable ASLR if you launch a new shell. And now we can check what's the process ID of this. So this would just give you where the memory, what does the memory maps look like for this binary. So we can see that libc is loaded at the base here. So now we know like how the program works and what's the libc getting used and where it's loaded. So all we need to do is to make an exploit is just to fill in the address of where the system would be, the system call in libc, and where the bin sh string would be, and we just need to jump to these addresses and do the job. So this is the exploit that I've written for it. You can see that I'm using pawn tools. Pawn tools is very helpful in these scenarios. I mean, it's not doing anything magical, but it really has all the tools needed to create an exploit. So I've already copied the libc that I was using for this activity in the repo and in this directory. So we can load the libc using this elf, which is also given by pawn tools, elf construct or whatever. And then using this we can also set up the load the base address. So for my system, as we checked, this is the base address that we got from psox, got from proc mappings. And the system address is just trying to find the system address in the libc. So you can also get it using readelf or some other tool, but pawn tool just makes it like simple, and you can just write it in Python and in plain English pretty much. Then it's trying to find a reference to bin.sh. So usually libcs will have a sequence of bytes which resolves to bin.sh string, and it just gives the address of that and just prints the different addresses that we got. And this is the ret. This is a gadget that we're going to use to make sure we don't get into some alignment issues, because so this is kind of like it happens in the newer versions of Linux. But if your option is not working, it might be because your address, your stack address or your XMM register address is not a multiple of 8. So to do that, we can call ret, and that fixes it up. So if your exploit is if your option is not working, it's a good idea to just add a ret someplace and just test it out once. So this is the ret that we're going to use. It doesn't do much besides that. So this is the exploit. So we saw that the buffer was 80 characters in size, and the next 8 characters are going to be RBP, which we don't care about for now. Then we have this pop RDI gadget. This is the pop RDI gadget we got from Ropper. So let me just show that. So Ropper kind of gives you all the different gadgets that you need to create a ROP chain, but it doesn't include all of them. But yeah, it should give you some basic gadgets that you want to, and like you can probably use it to develop most of the ret to libc and ret to plt exploits. So you can see that these are the complete list of gadgets. There are a lot, and I wanted to check for only RDI, so I just grep RDI and I can see a pop RDI gadget. So I want to control RDI because I'm gonna jump to system, and system only takes one parameter, which is gonna be in RDI. So I need to fill RDI with bin.sh string in my exploit. So you can see that we got the pointer of bin.sh from the libc here, and then we are just making a ROP chain by setting up pop RDI, after that bin.sh, after that a ret to just kind of align the stack, and then a call to system. We can see how it looks like. I've set up a checkpoint so that we can walk it with a debugger on the side. So let's just, yeah. So this is the current, yeah. What is the process ID? It's 3015. And let's just set up a breakpoint at like the last ret in main. That's where our ROP chain will begin executing. Just press continue here, and we are off. All right, so we're at main here, and we've already received the malicious input in the program, and now we are at the stage where everything you can see like what really happens. So we're at the last ret in main, so whatever the top of the stack is going to be put in the RIP, and just it's going to jump there basically. So I step into it. I can see that my pop RDI gadget is getting executed, and whatever is on the top of the stack is going to put into RDI. So we have the bin.sh string on the stack, which is all good. Then whatever next is on the stack, we're going to jump there. So right now we are jumping to our ret to make the stack more aligned, or if there is an issue, it would solve it. Yeah, we are at ret now, and now we can see on the buffer we on the stack we have the address to system next. So we are gonna ret to system now, and we can see that RDI is properly set to bin.sh. So we can just continue at this point, and here we can see that we have a shell. So system did get executed with the bin.sh, and it's just running bin.sh for now. And as I was root at running the binary, I'm root in the shell as well. So we have just looked at the first scenario. This is the popularly known as red to libc attack, where you know the libc file, know the libc version, and ASLR is disabled. So we see that NX and relro has like no effect on libc. Libc is working. So ASLR might make it harder, but it still works without ASLR being enabled or disabled. So this is how we basically know create like exploit for ret to libcs. So libc is known and ASLR is disabled. That's the assumptions. And so we execute the binary and like check the proc PID maps. We copy the libc base, and once libc is known, the exploit is simply to return to RDI, return to system with like RDI is equal to bin.sh. So yeah, we have like bin.sh. We just went over the exploit, so we saw that libcs have bin.sh mostly, and we can use like pawn tools to find offsets to these addresses. Also, you can use readelf or something else. And we also need a pop RDI gadget, which we grab using Ropper, and then this is how the exploit looks like. So for the second case, we're gonna go with similar restrictions, except ASLR is gonna be enabled, and we have no libc version this time, and no libc is provided, and ASLR is enabled, which is on 64-bit Linux. So let's jump into the demo and like try to see how to exploit with ret to PLT. So for this particular demo, we have the same program. The only difference is ASLR is enabled. So let's just set it to 2 for making sure that it is. And this program works the exactly same way, so we don't need to go into specifics. We can just directly jump in the exploit. So the difference is that we don't have libc's version, we don't have the libc file, right? And those addresses are going to change anyway every time, and the offsets are not if the libc is constant, but the addresses are going to change. So we need to leak, and then we need to figure out, we need to leak at least 2 addresses to figure out what libc is being used, because in this scenario we assume that the libc version is not known. So yeah, to start with, this is how the binary looks, the main looks. We have the ports, we are referring to the PLT and GOT entries here. Again, we are using the ELF construct which pawn tool provides, and we can just get offsets to PLT and GOT entries for any function that it uses. So I've saved puts got and gets got and puts PLT here in these variables. And then this is just address to main, so that after our first phase of the exploit is gonna run, we're gonna jump to main back, so that we have another primitive to write, so that after we get our leaks, then we'll use those leaks to jump to system, right? So this exploit works in 2 phases. It's not only 1 phase anymore. And this is the pop RDA gadget which we get from Ropper the same way. This is the data segment which I'm not using right now. All right, so like we can just run the exploit and debug it to understand it better. So let me just run the part one. Part one just contains the first phase. So it just got a leak and exit for now. Okay, so yeah, we are here attached to 3701 main. Do the same breakpoint at main, the last ret main. Alright, so we can see that we're gonna jump to the pop RDI gadget. Let's jump there. We can see the top of the stack is puts got entry, so it's just gonna fill that in RDI. And now we have jumped into puts with RDI's value. We've jumped into puts PLT, and RDI's value is this, which is got entry of puts. So we're gonna get the leak of this address basically, and for every different execution this address is going to be different. So that's why we have to, in the same execution cycle, we have to get the leaks as well as use those leaks to exploit as well. We cannot restart the program and then use the same addresses because ASLR would randomize it on every run. So yeah, so right now we're just printing out the got table entry, so you can see that we get some leaks out, right? So now it jumped back to main because in our ROP chain we have defined that. So we are jumping to pop RDI first, then we are setting the puts got entry into RDI, then we are jumping into puts PLT, and then we are doing that again with gets got and puts PLT. So it's gonna print out two addresses, puts got and gets got, and then it's gonna finally go to main, right? So we can see that the leaks are working. All we need is we need to parse it in our program. So I've already written the parsing for it. So it just reads a line and encodes it into hex, then converts it into an integer, and we have these leaks with us. So after the leaks, we are going to jump to start the main. So this time in our program, we'll set up in our debugger, we'll set up a breakpoint there, not the part one. Yep. So we attach to 3772. This is assembly main. We're gonna breakpoint here because after our leaks are completed, it's gonna breakpoint at main. So yeah, let's just continue. Put the document in. Just a second. This is what happens when you like write exploits. I don't know why I changed this, but yeah, it's like a very meticulous job. So each byte can pretty much make or break it. So if you don't understand everything about it, it's very hard to debug. So that's why I use these checkpoints in the program so that I can see in the debugger exactly what's going on. For some reason my parsing is not working for that, from what I see. So let's just set up a breakpoint before gets. Just continue. Okay, so now it works. I guess like it wasn't working because I was trying to hex a string, but anyway. So like we can see that the puts and gets leak are these. Let's just verify in the debugger that are they accurate. So we can see that they are indeed. So our addresses, our leaks that we got from this program are accurate, and now it's again coming in for another round of gets. So now in this round we'll send them the second payload, right? So let's just, actually my program has already sent it the payload. It's just waiting on the gets call. Let me just disassemble main and set it here. Okay, so I'm there now, and this is the second drop chain which comes into picture, the second phase rather. So this is the first phase. After we get the leaks, now just a second, I forgot one thing. So after you get the leaks, you can go to this libc database. There are like a lot of libc databases. I mean, they've just basically downloaded all the libcs and made it easier for us to find out what version they are, just for these kind of exercises. And we can just put the values in here. So you can see that it matches our libc, and when I check this libc, you can see that it shows us. I mean, you can also get this from pawn tools or read or etc. But like, it's just easier to just grab these offsets from here. So you can see it just directly gives that a system is at this particular address, and you can also see the puts and gets offsets, and we need the bin sh. So bin sh offset is here. So now I'm just gonna subtract the leaks with like the offsets that I grabbed from there, and add libc base to the system and bin sh offsets I grabbed from there again. These are the offsets I've written. And now it's pretty much the same job. We just need to pop RDI, get the bin sh into RDI and call system. Now we know the exact addresses of those things, so it doesn't really like stop us from doing the attack. So you can see that pop RDI ret is happening, and we can see that what's the value of RDI. RDI is set to bin sh, and it's just gonna call system because it's at ret, and ret on top of the stack is system. So we're just gonna continue, and we see that we have a shell indeed. So we just got done with the second exploit. This kind of summarizes how it works. So we first need to find gadgets to control RDI, which are easy to find using Ropper. In this program though, we need to print the leaks and then use those leaks to find the libc offsets that we need. So to get the leaks, we use the GOT table and PLT table entries. Using PLT table, we can jump to any function that is used in the program. So the program used puts and gets, so we can pretty much jump to either of those functions. We want to use puts because we want to leak, we want to print out the address values so that we can use it in the program to calculate the libc's base. So that's what we did. This is the offset was 88, and then we did pop RDI. We put the GOT address here, and then we just passed to PLT puts, and after it puts it prints the addresses. We're just gonna jump to main to do another round of this, and then after we have the libc base and all the offsets needed for the system and binsh and all these things, we can use the second round to get to read to system like we did in the earlier exploits. So in the action, it looks like this. We first leak, and then we figure out the libc version using libc databases. And after leaking, in the second round, we just use the same exploit, pop RDI into the binsh string into RDI, and then just read to system. So now finally we are in case 3. This case is a little different. Is kind of subtle to spot the differences in this case. The program is a little bit different. We don't use puts anymore, we use write. And as you might know that write has 3 parameters to it. It not only takes 1, it takes 3. And the third parameter is the length. So as long as we don't control the third parameter, it's very hard for us to get leaks using write. So that's why read to CSU is pretty useful in this case. And like we need to control 3 registers in this case. We need to control RDI, RSI, and RDX. So RDI and RSI are easy to, the gadgets for RDI and RSI to control these are easy to spot using Ropper. Like we have pop RDI and pop RSI gadgets. But the RDX gadget is like nowhere to be found. So how do we exploit this program? Because we cannot control RDX to get the leaks, and we cannot really do anything unless we have the registers, right? So this is where exactly read to CSU comes. So read to CSU just adds like a bunch of gadgets that are not shown in a Ropper because of the way those gadgets kind of work. So there is this function. If you compile your library, if you compile your binary with a libc, with any libc, pretty much, you should have like libcsu init function in your binary, even if you're not using any of the functions. And this function has 2 set of gadgets that are very useful to control all of these registers, RDX, RSI, and RDI. So you can see that we can just jump to this particular gadget here, and we can pop all of these register values. We still don't control RDX, but just hold on for a second. So after we control all these values, we can then jump to this particular gadget. You can see that RDX is set to R15, and R15 was in our control from this gadget anyway. So that's how we control RDX. RSI is R14, that's how we control that. And EDI is R13, so that's what we control using that. And then we just call at the pointer R12. So R12 is in our control again. So we just need to fill R12 with the PLT table entry that we want to call. R13 is going to be RDI. R14 is going to be RSI, and R15 is going to be RDX. And if we do that properly, we are able to control like 3 registers and call write with with the values that we control, and we can leak out the addresses like we did in the last case, even with outputs. So let's jump in the demo. Alright, so we, as compared to our last sample program, this is kind of different. The only change is pretty much that we're using write instead of puts here. So you can check it out in GDB. There's not a lot of differences between the binaries. It's just that the call to this is changed and some offsets might be here and there. The calling principle still remains the same, but instead of having to control only RDI, now we have to control 3 registers because there's no other way to leak addresses from this binary without using write. So we'll have to control EDI, ESI, and RDX, and to do that we'll use the read to CSU gadgets. So you can do info functions in GDB to find what are the defined symbols. You can see that libcsu init and fini are defined. So I'm just going to disassemble this this is the pop gadget, the set of pops. So we will be able to write to all these registers, and then there should be another gadget which copies these to the meaningful registers and calls. So 5DA and 5C0. So we can check out the exploit and also run it here. So you can see I've already written down the constants, the addresses to the call and the pop registers, pop gadgets. And we get the GOT entries in the same way that we did earlier on. So the payload pretty much works as we expected to. We first overwrite the 88 characters, and then we first jump to CSU pops gadget, which will basically pop off multiple values from the stack and put them in registers. So these are those register values, and I'm setting those register values here in just to set up like the arguments and the values of different registers I want it to be. So for the first case, I'm setting it up to write got the RIP, which is like I want to use the write got to execute, and RSI is the second argument, which is gets got. So write second argument is the buffer. So in this case, it will just print out gets got's address. And then we move to the CSU call gadget, which would just move some values of these registers and call. And then we do it again for the other got entry, for the write got entry. So we're printing out gets got and write got. That would give us 2 leaks for the libc. In the end, we are just gonna jump to main. So I have set up a checkpoint here. Let's set up a checkpoint before we receive. All right. Let's start. So I'm just going to do the same, set up a breakpoint at the last rat to see what we have on the stack to begin with. I'm just going to press continue, and we are here. So in this case, we see that we have the pop gadget right on the stack as we are about to read, and I'll just open up the exploit while we are looking at this. So the first thing I've put in is 4005DA, which is the address of this gadget. So as you can see, we're just going to pop different values into these registers. RBX is supposed to be 0, so we're just popping 0 from the stack. Same with RBP. Then comes R12. In our case, we want R12 to be the write got, so it's just an address pointing to the libc address, and in the end the call is gonna basically resolve this address and jump here. So I'm setting up R12, R13, R14 and R15 registers. All of these are now controlled using our input. So you can see that R13 is 1, R15 is 8, R14 is our values that we controlled here. And then after this, we'll jump to the call CSU call gadget. Here we can see R15 is going to move to RDX, RSI R14, and EDI R13. So now we have like R12 set to our right got, and RBX is set to 0, right? RBX is set to 0, and then so this call is just gonna evaluate to R12 plus 0 into 8, and it just points to R12, which is this, just jumps there. So as you can see, we are in right. Now we can press continue, and we are in checkpoint 2. So you can see that the program gets the leaks and calculates the libc base according to the known offsets for this libc. So again, like, we'll just go to the libc database and put these in. You just need to verify what the, yeah, so the symbol for write is underscore underscore write in this particular libc. That's why it wasn't showing when I said the symbol is something else. So again, this is where the libc matches, and we have the different constants, offsets, that we can just copy to our exploit. So I've already filled these in here, and the system is at, yeah, so everything matches. Then we just get libc base using the same technique, just subtract from the gets offset and gets libc, and then get the other system and bin sh pointers. Then we just need to do a pop RDI ret, set bin sh to RDI, and then call to system. So let's just try if it works. So at this point we are in ret. We're gonna just ret to set the stack properly. Then we're gonna pop RDI, and the top of the stack has been sh. Then we return into system, and we can see the system is getting called. We can continue. So you can see we have a shell. So that was ret to CSU in action. And to summarize, we first leak the libc addresses using write call, and write takes in 3 values. That means we had to control RSI, RDI, and RDX registers. For RSI and RDI, we had gadgets in place that we could do that easily, but for RDX we had to use the ret to CSU gadget. Otherwise it's pretty hard to get around that. And after we control RDX, it's pretty easy to leak the same got entries like we did in previous exploits using write call. And after the entries are leaked, we again put them in the libc database search and figure out what libcs are being used. And then after that, we just find offsets to system and bin sh and use pop RDI to ret to system. So the second phase of the ROP chain remains the same. The first phase, which is used for the leaks, uses the ret CSU part. That's all I had prepared. Thanks a lot for watching. You can get the repo with the slides and like final exploits and code. It's present at github/Aneesh/DarkCON ret CSU. You can ask me any questions on Twitter, and I'll be sure to answer them within an hour or two. And you can check out my blog if you need any help on exploitation challenges, or if you're stuck on understanding a technique. I blog about it there. Thanks for watching, guys.
That was an extraordinary session by Aneesh Dogra, and I'm pretty sure you guys stayed really focused throughout it. So now it's finally time to test your focus. As mentioned before, you would be given 10 to 15 minutes to solve the challenge, and as soon as you get the flag, drop it down below so we know who got the flag first. Also, Dark Army will contact the winner by itself, so no need to worry about it. Meanwhile, you can put your best efforts to solve the challenge and get the flag. we have reached the end of our conference, and I would like to place my wholehearted thanks to all of you for being a part of this experience. It has really been very mesmerizing. Also, I would like to congratulate all the winners of the giveaways from yesterday, from today. Thank you for actively participating in the small challenges and activities our speakers and our team prepared for you. Also, I believe it has been a huge opportunity to get a platform where we get to listen from such diligent speakers and know more about our interests particularly and boost our skill sets. So once again, a huge thank you to make this event a success, and I wish all of you very good luck in your life and keep learning, keep growing. Thank you.